Hey guys, welcome to this session by Intellipaat. Databases have played such a huge role in today's world of internet and technology, right? When you think about it, most of the data that gets stored online is in the form of a database or another. Now, Azure SQL is one of these databases that is growing exponentially quick and it is very secure. It is jam packed with features, and people across the globe are in fact using it. So keeping this in mind, we here at Intellipaat have come up with this video where we'll be discussing a lot about Azure SQL, give you a quick introduction about it, and to show you what the certifications are when it comes to the training aspects of Azure SQL and more. Well guys, before we begin with the session, make sure to hit that subscribe button and that bell icon so that you'll never miss any updates from us. Now, coming to the agenda of the session, we'll start out by taking a quick look at what makes Azure SQL special. After understanding this, we can have an introduction to understand what Azure SQL is, and in fact, why is it important for us to learn Azure SQL, or in fact, why is it important for Azure SQL to exist today as well. After that, we can check out the latest pricing aspects of making use of Azure SQL, and of course at the end of it we can walk through a comprehensive guide through which we can take a look at the Azure SQL database certification training, what is involved, what are the job roles, and a lot more. Well guys, without further ado, let's begin the class. So coming to the first point on the agenda of this Azure SQL database training, let us start by understanding what makes Azure SQL special. See, one thing you really have to know about Azure SQL is that it's a beautifully implemented database on the cloud platform, right? It's extremely powerful, it's very intelligent, and I'm sure if you're at this video, if you're looking towards training, you might have a good idea about why Azure SQL is at the top of its game, right? First of all, you really have to know that it's an already intelligent database system, and right now Microsoft is working day in and day out to make it even better. This is a product that we consider to be almost perfect in the world of cloud computing, and now people have decided to make it even better, and that really is an amazing thing, right? It's not just that, because when you think about everything that you get for the money that you pay, see, for example, you get 100 terabytes worth of storage in total if you wish to use it, and if you aren't aware about this feature called as hyperscaling with vCore, this is one of the amazing features which Azure SQL gives all of its users, where you can scale your data across. You can use the compute power of multiple database backends at a time, and basically you can do a lot, have a huge result, make sure the result is extremely efficient with you putting as little effort as possible. That's the entire goal of Azure SQL. And if you're wondering if that is all, well, let me tell you this. One of the things that makes Azure SQL really famous for a production environment is the fact that it has top-notch database restoration capabilities. Now, see, data is something which is very volatile, right? There's a very good chance you store it on a cloud database, and if the cloud database fails, then it means that you lose your data. Now, when it comes to Azure, right, so especially with this particular Azure SQL database thing, they make sure that your data is safe. They make sure that there is a lot of redundancies in place, and even if one or two things fail at the end of the day, your data can be restored without having to put much effort, taking much time, or any of the complexity that usually follows. And then if you're wondering about data backup, and again, as I spoke about redundancy, you can have instantaneous data backup across your entire database ranges, no matter the size, because at the end of the day, the people at Microsoft really know about the value of data. They really care about it, and this shows in all of their products, including the Azure SQL system. Now, there's another important thing that you really should know about Azure SQL is that it supports geo-replication across continents. So if you have your data sitting in one part of the world in a cloud machine, in a server right there, and you want to replicate it across let's say another part of the world, for example, you might be sitting in India and you might be working on your data here, your database is located on a server here, and then you move to the United States of America or the vice versa as well, and then you want to sit there and have your data to be there. Well, guess what, you can replicate your data across any single continent that you want to, wherever there are Azure SQL servers basically, and that makes it really convenient. And whenever we talk about this, in terms of production environment, you really have to understand that this is a huge thing. And then you guys, if you're on this video looking for training, right, we understand that you'll have a query saying how easy is it to work with Azure SQL database. Well, this is one of those databases that is really known for its once edit and have a result kind of a goal, because once you you really don't have to start and keep messing with queries all the damn time, because at the end of the day we understand that it can get mind boggling working with complex queries in SQL. But here with Azure SQL, you really don't have to worry about any of that, because you can edit your database all at once if you choose to do it, and your queries are pretty simple. And of course, queries always get complicated, but there's many features there to help you out there too. So coming to the basic question first, what is Azure SQL database, right? See, one thing you really have to know is that it is probably one of the world's most reliable and secure relational database as a service. So this is basically a database as a service on the cloud. And what it does is that it really gives all of the users around the world, really high performing database without having to need any sort of, really complex or expensive infrastructure at all. If you have a decent enough internet connection, if you have a decent enough laptop, let's say, let me tell you this, you are powered up to use Azure SQL and almost all of its capabilities. It is really that powerful, even though I made it out to be very simple, but you do have to understand that, this is the entire, advantage, right? The cloud computing advantage, of course, that we have. And with the Azure SQL, that brings it straight into the center of the stage. Data can be handled in multiple ways. For example, Azure SQL can handle JSON data, XML data, and data from a wide variety of sources, be it structured, be it unstructured. You can work with your data. You have the complete freedom to access it, to create databases, make it talk with servers, add rows, add tables, delete it, upgrade it. You do whatever you want. And now, if I say whatever you want, you might be thinking, well, whatever I want might be complex, right? Again, stepping to the same architecture of how Azure works. Even though you might think that the task at hand is complex, there will be a nook and cranny in Azure SQL that will make sure that it's simplified. So there are three ways that you can, have your data to be stored on the cloud and in fact work with Azure SQL as well. Of course, the most simple way is the single database. We have elastic pools whenever you're working with multiple databases across the globe, and of course you have managed instances as well. So depending on your requirement, you might be an enthusiast who's looking to learn. In that case, there's a very good chance you'll be handling single databases. If you're working in a production environment, there are pretty good chances where you'll be, using either elastic pool or managed instances, depending on a lot of things, depending on the requirements, depending on the client, depending on the project itself. So next up, we have many other databases right now, right? So you can think of probably 5 or 6 databases if you're on this video. So you will have a question saying, why is Azure SQL so important? Well, in today's world, there are 4 really important things when it comes to anything data, anything database. Here it is. The first thing is network security. See, all of the data that you will be storing on the database on the cloud platform can be private data, public data, whatever it is, right? So it has to be secure. Your entire database platform, the architecture has to be really secure in a way that not anyone can come in and misuse it and diminish privacy and all of that. So providing top-notch network security, that is what Azure SQL does really well when we talk about the databases. And the second thing is threat protection, right? So as I told you, if your data is online or if it's sitting in one common place such as a database, it means it is vulnerable to attacks. Keeping that in mind, Azure SQL databases provide you really good features when it comes to protecting against external threats. And then we have access management. See, for example, you will have multiple databases, but you really do not want to give the full-blown access to all of these people, right? That is why in companies we have something we call as level access, L1 access, L2 access, L3 access, and so much more. So, depending on all of that, whatever is required based on that person's need to handle the data, we will actually go on to assign access. For example, if you have if you have a very complex architecture in which you really do not want to provide access for security purposes, you're scared that someone might misuse it, or someone might, mess around with it, well, really mess with the data, to be honest. Well, there's a lot of things, right? So considering all of that, this access management is something that SQL database does really, really well. And then information protection: if your data is online, it is vulnerable. If it's sitting in one common place such as a database, it is vulnerable. If it can be accessed by a lot of people or without any of the first three important factors that we talked about, your data is vulnerable. Well, so with information protection, you have a lot of firewalls to think about, and you have many things that that is basically a convoluted chain, as we'll be checking out in the next couple of slides. Is that breaking into an Azure SQL database is almost impossible. I'm saying almost because I would never say 100% impossible, because you never know, right? So before someone can get into the customer data, before a person can get his or her hands in an unauthorized way to the customer data, they really have to go through all of this. And beating Microsoft at their game, especially when it comes to security, is not an easy ball to play around with, right? So that is something you really have to consider. As I told you, when we talk about network security, there are a large number of firewalls that are present, and it's not just the sheer number of firewalls that make it scary. It's just that they're extremely powerful as well. So knowing, if hackers know that there are implementations such as this which would make it almost impossible to get into, there's a good chance they would not waste their time and effort into knowing that this could be unbreakable, right? So that's one important thing. And then, as I told you regarding access management, how is it done? Well, it's actually based on the IP address. So you can assign IP address and assign access to the databases, to the server management controls, and all of that based on the IP address. And that itself is going to provide you with a lot of security in a way where you know where the access came from, if it was either authorized, unauthorized, or what. So trackability and post disaster management wise as well, this is really good. And then, as I just told you, right, the security methodologies that are put into place are actually convoluted. What do we mean by convoluted? Convoluted means it's like a circle. It's a concentric circle where one methodology sits inside the other one and the other one sits inside the other one. So it's like the Russian doll, right, when you think about it. So once people start thinking that, hey, I broke one layer of security, now I'm going to have access to the data, well, sorry to disappoint, because there'll be 3 or 4 more even more powerful threat protection systems that are put into place. So one after the other, it makes sure that someone cannot have unauthorized access. And if you're wondering why we're talking about all of this, this is exactly why Azure is popular. This is exactly why thousands and thousands of people across the globe prefer using Microsoft Azure SQL. And what does it do to you guys as learners? Well, at the end of the day, give it a thought, right? Because if this is what the community wants, and if this is what Microsoft Azure is promising and providing, well, it will just create a lot of jobs for you guys, a lot of interest, a lot of future trends as well. So that is something you guys should be really speculating on. And then, of course, when we talk about information protection, all of your data is not just stored in the database, it gets thoroughly encrypted. Because once your data is encrypted, decrypting it takes a lot of skill, a lot of effort. And if there's no key to decrypt it, well, it's almost impossible to do it. It's going to take ages to break a key even without having it. So again, when we're talking about security, when we're talking about why the world prefers Microsoft Azure SQL, this is one of the reasons as well. So now, there's a very good chance you guys are wondering about the pricing of Azure SQL databases, right? Well, let's talk about the single database instance pricing, because here for 1 GB of usage, you'll have to pay somewhere around 9,123 Indian rupees per month. You get scalability up to 512 gigabytes of storage in total, and of course, you have data backup features as well. So whenever we talk about data backup, we talk about the RAGRS, which will cost you somewhere around 15 or 16,000 Indian rupees per month. Now,
If you're wondering about do we really require data backup now that our entire SQL database is already online, well, let me tell you, the answer is yes, because at the end of the day you will never know, right? Your data is at the hands of Microsoft, and if something goes wrong by chance, it rarely goes wrong, but if something goes wrong, you really don't want your entire company's production system to come to a halt. That can cause a lot of problems for the next couple of months. So to prevent all of that, it is always better to have data backups, right? See, we, as in our personal life, we make sure that our songs are backed up, our photos are backed up, and a lot of things, and we know the value of probably losing data. Now if you think about a company losing all of that data, it almost seems impossible to get back on their feet and get up to speed, right? So keeping all that in mind, Microsoft Azure usually prices their products a bit competitively as well. So to know that they provide the best of the stuff out there, people will want it, people will come get it, and of course that's how it's going. And prices are of course always subject to change. What price you might see today can be heavily discounted tomorrow, or the price might inflate a little bit as well. So I always recommend, if you're looking for the latest pricing on Microsoft Azure SQL databases, always head to the Microsoft website. Do check it out there. They have an entire page with the complete details of pricing. So probably based on the requirements of the company, the individual, or the personal, then you will have a clear idea of what it might cost to have this database up and running on the cloud as well. So then when we talk about the certification training aspect of it, right? See, I can walk you through the 100 advantages of using Azure SQL database, but I'm sure you guys at this point of time know the value of Azure SQL, right? So keeping that all in mind, knowing that there's a huge demand, knowing that Azure SQL is trending, how do you guys work on becoming experts in Azure SQL? Well, when we talk about Azure in general, right? So there's usually more than they have a lot of examinations and they have a lot of certifications. For example, there's multiple job roles like Azure Administrator, Azure Developer, and Azure Solutions Architect. So when you think about the amount of effort, the amount of skill, preparation, and learning that takes for you guys to just start up with Microsoft native cloud environment, well, it's going to take some time and skill, guys, because at the end of the day, if you have any of these jobs, right, Azure Administrator, Azure Developer, Azure SQL Expert, Azure Architect, Solutions Architect, whatever it is, to have and hold one of these designations is something which is really amazing, and I'm sure every one of you guys who's watching the video right now can do it. But you really have to work on a structured way where you guys can get started on it, learn on it, and of course build on it. But then let's come back to the Microsoft Azure SQL database, because here of course there is one certification exam that you'll have to clear to be certified from Microsoft itself, and that talks about a couple of things. Let's take it up in an order so we can understand what you guys will be learning as well. See, to start out with this examination, you guys will be working on the Azure SQL fundamentals first, because as with any other concept out there, you really have to know the fundamentals and the basics to begin with, because these foundational concepts are what that make Azure SQL what it is. So if you really do not know that, then moving ahead will be tough. So knowing Azure SQL fundamentals is going to be the key step to start your journey into becoming a Microsoft certified associate. Well, after understanding the fundamentals, you guys will be checking on how you can actually implement the data platform resources, right? See, when we talk about Microsoft SQL or any of the database services that these guys provide, it's a huge ocean, because they don't tend to cater to only the beginners, or they don't tend to cater only to the most simple use cases, right? You have entire companies that make use of Azure SQL, probably with terabytes worth of data, and they keep moving it every month, every day, in fact. So they are bound to provide a lot of features, but your job as a learner is to make sure that you're not overwhelmed with all the features that are present, because it definitely can get overwhelming to learn, and of course to clear a certification training program, it's going to take some effort as well, right? But at this point of time, step number 2 is where you'll be actually implementing the data platform resources, understanding what are the resources that are present, how best can you work with them, and of course how efficiently can you get the job done by making use of these resources. So I hope step 1 and step 2 were clear. And then when we talk about the next two steps, it's all about security, and again it's about resources, right? See, step number 3 talks about how you can implement a secure environment for working and scalability. Here is where you'll actually talk about and work with a lot of security features that's provided with Microsoft Azure SQL, as we spoke about in the previous couple of slides. So I just mentioned what you'll get, how it's done, and all of that, right? But here is where this step will discuss all of that to a great amount of detail, in a way where if you were the solutions provider to a client, you really should know everything that comes with how you can secure an environment there, right? So this deals with all of that. And then when we're talking about point number 4, you really need to know how you have to work with resources first of all, as we discussed in step number 2. If step number 2 is something that, in the learning path that you have really done well, then you really have to know how you can go on to monitor these resources, right? It's not just using these resources, you have to check if they're being used to their best. As I told you, it's not just using it, it's about how best you can use it. So to optimize the resources and to continuously monitor them, it's going to take some analytics. Well, for analytics, there's already a lot of tools provided with Azure SQL databases, and you can just use that. So you need to have this skill, you need to have a knack to understand the data and then work with all the resources that are present to make sure you're not either over exceeding your budget that you might have for a databases, and probably even underutilizing all of that as well, right? So step number 4 is somewhere where you really have to pay attention. And then coming to step number 5 and step number 6. Step number 5 always talks about how one can optimize query performance, because let's be very honest here for a second. If there is an SQL problem at hand, let's say there's a problem at hand, of course, which would require an SQL solution or via a query, you have to understand that to one problem, there's a very good chance that you can write, let's say, 5 different queries that will cater to the same solution. But are all of these 5 queries very similar to each other? In the goal wise, probably yes, but then when we dig really into the details, you have to understand that the performance of each of these queries vary a lot. So it might be time dependent, it might be resource dependent, and a lot of other things too. So keeping that all in mind, your job as a certified expert is to make sure how best can your queries run without really bogging down on the performance of the machines that you have opted for in the database, and of course not using a lot of time as well. Because let's face it, even though Microsoft SQL or the databases are really powerful, your budget might not allow to go there too. I mean, of course, there's a lot of free packages that they provide at the start, but then when you're scaling up, it might get difficult. So keeping every single query as efficient and as effective as possible should be written in capital letters when you begin your journey into this step, and of course into the journey of Azure SQL databases as well. So once you understand how well you can write the queries and how effective they are, you really have to work on how you can automate all of these tasks in SQL, right? See, there's a lot of things one can do in an SQL server. When I say lot, again, that's in capital letters. So to go about understanding how to do this is one thing. The second thing is to see if you can get away without doing these tasks. Now, hey, I'm not telling you not to do the tasks. I'm telling you find a way to automate these tasks, because whenever we talk about database automation, again, Microsoft Azure SQL really thrives here compared to the competitors, because these guys are implementing the top-notch methodologies, be it the tools, be it the method of working, be it ease of use, be it workability, whatever points we talk about in terms of automation, there's a common consensus that Microsoft Azure is really at the top of its game for that. So considering that, you will really have to learn on how you can automate a lot of tasks to make sure that you, at the end of the day, as a resource in your company, can put your time and effort where it matters the most, rather than sitting and doing tasks which can be automated very easily, right? And if you're wondering about how easy is it to generally automate these tasks in Microsoft SQL, well, let me tell you that it really is easy if you know how to work around these tools that are present there. But then to get there, this is one important step that you really have to work on in your learning path. When we talk about the next important step is disaster recovery, guys. Let's be very honest here. Whenever we talk about anything related to storing your data online, storing it in a database on a remote location, whatever it is, there's a very good chance that there can be disasters where you might lose your data, right? See, for example, wherever the server is located, let's say it's an earthquake prone area or something like that, and the database got destroyed, or it was a software error, it was a power failure, whatever it is. So a disaster can come in many ways, and of course when it hits, you really won't know the result out of it, right? So to keep it very sane, to keep it very secure, and to make sure your data can be recovered, you as a person who is looking towards being certified in Azure SQL databases need to learn, and of course you will learn with good training, about how you can plan a disaster recovery system and how you can implement it as well. God forbid that you will not have a chance to actually implement and use the disaster recovery system. This is just like the airbags in our car. We have it for safety, but we keep wishing we really don't have to use it, right? It's the same analogy here. But to know that you have an airbag is one thing, but then to make sure that your airbag works is another entire different ball game, right? That's what I'm trying to convey to you guys. You guys as experts, who's certified, and who's working in an environment should have the capabilities to get that as well. So in a good certification training program, this is something that would help you actually clear the examinations that's required for the Azure SQL Database Associate exam there too. So all in all, to wrap it up, we really have to put it in one slide, because see, as I told you, you will have to plan and implement the data platform resources, knowing how to use it, where to use it, when to use all these resources. You will have to implement a secure environment to make sure your data is secure and safe. And then of course there's a lot of resources out there. Do not be overwhelmed. Understand how you can optimize all of these resources, understand how you can continuously monitor them for budget issues, constantly monitor them for basic working as well. And then when we talk about queries, there's a million ways one can write queries, but in that million ways, there's only one or two ways which will be extremely high performing, and it'll be very low on memory, very low on computing power and all that. So just to blow that up out of scale, make sure you guys know how to optimize the query performance as well. And then as a Microsoft associate, the skill that you will require to clear this examination is to make sure you have the capability to implement an HADR environment. Whenever we say HADR, it's high availability and disaster recovery, as we discussed in the couple previous points ahead as well. So when you think about all of that, one important skill that you will really require if you're looking to become an expert in Azure SQL is the ability of you to use and scale with TSQL. TSQL basically stands for Transact SQL, and it's a very popular form of SQL that's used in these databases as well. So when you're thinking about all of this, probably take a note of this slide, take a screenshot or something, and this is something that you will have to work on, not in that particular order probably, but at the end of the day you will still need to work from fundamentals to your level of expertise that's required, right? So to clear the Microsoft examinations, I'm sure you guys might need some sort of help to get there in the first attempts. One, whenever we talk about these Microsoft certification examinations, they will cost you a bit of money. They will not be free, and you will have to put in your time and effort to do it. But what's the point if your learning might not be aligned with what's asked, and if you do not clear the certification examination, right? So this is where a good certification training courses come into the picture with a training program, right? See, for example, we here at Intellipaat provide a lot of training courses when it comes to Microsoft Azure as well. So after this video, what you can do is you can head to the Intellipaat website, just type in Microsoft Azure, and you will see the courses that we provide for Azure. So anyway, coming back, so one thing you really have to know is that having a certification training certificate itself is a stamp of excellence, because people will really know, potential hirers, your friends, or your experts, your seniors, whoever they are, they will know that you've put in a good amount of time and your effort to actually go on to learn it. And once you're cleared with the certifications will ask you so much amount of proficiency that you will be an expert if you have cleared it. It's as simple as that. And then of course a certification program will always get you hired, because at the end of the day, people will know. An interviewer sitting at the opposite end of your table in an interview will understand that you have the capability to learn stuff on your own, you have the capability to work on production level projects, and of course you can be trained by industry level experts as well. So it knows that you are learnable, you are teachable, you have the skills, and of course you're working on them, you have done projects in them and all of that, right? So that will do nothing but add value to your resume. And then clearing corporate requirements, guys, this is one of the most important things why a certification is required, because at the end of the day, if you're looking for a dream job in a certain company, you might clear all the requirements that they say that you should have for the job, and at the end of it they'll be like, hey, we want you to clear this examination, this certification and all of that. But if you have not done that, if you really have all of the other requirements, sometimes your application might not be considered, because they really want you to be certified, because they know if you have a certification certification, that there is a sure shot advantage or a guarantee that you know your stuff. So to make sure that that is a requirement, to clear this sort of requirements that come up in the job roles, and you can in fact Google job roles right now, right? So you will understand that some of the companies, some of the really big companies that pay an amazing amount, it's not even the big companies, even small companies today as well. So these guys require you to clear certifications, and in that regard, having a good certification training program, especially in Azure SQL, is going to add a lot of value and benefit your career in the start, in the long term, and throughout as well. And then the last point we really have to talk about is how you will get a substantial increase in pay. Whenever there are talks about certification, people usually say you will get a better hike when you compare to a person who is not certified in the same role. And I think I agree with that, because as I told you, right, if you're certified, it's a guarantee to the company that you know your stuff. And if that's the case, they would want to retain you. They would want to make sure that you get a higher pay, because at the end of the day, you'll be adding that much more value into the company, first of all. And second of all, if there is a situation, right, see for example disaster recovery, if there's a situation of how best one can optimize a query and all of these things, you could be the person who do it better. I'm not saying that you have to have the certification or you cannot do it, but then I think you guys are getting my point here, right? So this is one of the important things that you guys really should understand. Well, with that, we've come to the end of the session.
We hope the session on Microsoft Azure SQL databases was very informative for you all. If you guys have any comments, any feedback, or any other recommendations, content requests, or anything, make sure to head down to the comment section and do let us know. We'll be more than happy to help you out there. On that note, I hope all of you guys are keeping safe, and I wish you well and see you on the next one.